participant, and another friend of mine was an FLA participant who now sits on the board for FLA. We were under contract at the workshop, and we saw Mr. Cole speak and provided excellent, concrete, very applicable guidance for your law firm and your legal practice. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to the master practice advisor that I've worked with several times and I'm a big fan of, Mr. Dustin Cole.
I think you're going to need to share my screen.
Give me 1 minute, Mr. Cole. You want the slides up or the?
Yeah, slides up is good.
Okay, not the 6 principles.
Not the handout. My screen, actually, just my screen.
Okay.
Well, as John said, I'm Dustin Cole, Master Practice Advisor with Attorneys Masterclass, and our whole purpose is to help lawyers build better practices and better lives. You know, I've been listening here for about a half an hour. I just came in, but what I heard gave me all kinds of thoughts. And before I begin, I want to share one of them, and that is, I think it just occurred to me after 30 years that one of the biggest obstacles that attorneys have is the imposter syndrome. I think so many lawyers come in with the dream of being the $1 million lawyer, being the high profile, having everything wonderful, and spend most of their careers feeling like failures. And I think that's one of the places that we have to begin, is to understand that we're all striving for something that is not realistic. And I want to help you strive for a more realistic approach to your practice, and understand that that is an illusion. And what you want is a practice that works well for you, that satisfies you, that gives you a great life. So I want to share my 6 principles for a safer, more successful, and a more enjoyable practice. And I want to give you my guiding principle for the day, and it's sort of a corollary to what I just said. Legal work is not your purpose. I am lawyer is a way to, as Hamlet put it, a way to dusty death. Legal work is not who you are. It is the product that your business sells. And the purpose of your business is to allow you to have a great life. The legal profession has some of the highest rates of alcoholism, drug abuse, divorce, heart attack, even suicide. And I believe that 95% of grievances and malpractice claims, of stress and burnout, personal and health problems, are because law school taught you legal skills, but they didn't teach you how to run a successful business. They didn't teach you how to attract clients, how to assure that those clients are taken care of even when you're not there, how to organize and maximize the use of your time, how to choose and manage and utilize support staff. And the result is often a lack of money, of time and energy, and at the end of the day, a lack of hope. Again, the imposter syndrome. I must be a failure. So here are my 6 principles. The first principle is client selection. And I really begin here because you have to start to build a strong practice at your front door. You want to be very, very careful to avoid clients that are going to create problems for your practice. So often, attorneys that are not where they want to be financially take in a D or an F client in hope. Well, you know, they seem a little difficult, and I know they just must be frustrated, and I'm sure it'll all work out. Well, trust your gut. Dodge the bullet. Avoid the D and F clients. What are the warning signs? Well, they found you with a web search. It wasn't a referral. They didn't have any concrete reason. In fact, if they found you from a web search, it's one of the first questions you should ask anyone who calls or you talk with. How did you find me? And if it's a web search, ask a follow-up question. How many other lawyers did you talk to before you called me? Because that's the game that you're in if they found you in a web search. Very often their matter is small and dubious and maybe even out of your practice area. They have unreasonable expectations. They had a slip and fall in Walmart and they expect $1 million. They seem to not like attorneys, and perhaps they've even fired more than one. Again, a question you should ask. They don't listen. They want to talk. They want to tell you what to do. They're not coming to you for advice. They're coming you to tell you what to do. And at the end of the day, if you're an hourly biller and you're not contingency, they're going to bargain price. And often they're rude. They think they're smarter than you. Those are really the warning signs of a D or an F client. What does it cost you? Well, these are the people that have extraordinary demands on your time. They're constantly calling, they're emailing you, they're texting. Oh, by the way, please never give anyone your cell phone number. Never, 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 because they will abuse it. And you will be awakened at 11:30 at night when you've just managed to doze off by one of those crazy clients. It means you don't have any time to market or manage. It often means deals and write-downs and write-offs. And if you think you're stressed, understand that those D&E clients treat your staff even worse than they treat you. The result is stress and frustration and overwhelm. It means very often you neglect the very best clients you have because they're the quietest, they're the least demanding. So you end up sacrificing your relationships and your work for your good clients to try and satisfy the unsatisfiable. And someplace along the line, you may even be tempted to bend some of the ethics rules to satisfy, to placate that miserable client. Understand that this profile of the D client is exactly the profile of the person who will file a grievance or a malpractice suit. And either one or both could be totally unsubstantiated, but you're going to go through a lot of stress and struggle and distraction trying to get to the point where they're dismissed. The result, cynicism and unhappiness. And one of those days when you at 10:30 at night leave the office thinking to yourself, why in the world did I ever get into this crazy business in the first place? They steal from you. They hurt your revenues, distract you from good clients, increase your stress. I want to go back because one of the other thoughts that occurred to me as I was listening is about the word stress. The word stress is a misnomer. What it really is fear. Fear that you're going to fail. Fear that something is wrong that you didn't know about. So when you say, I'm stressed, understand what you're really saying. I'm scared. I am in fear. And that, my friend, is a terrible place to live. These clients risk your very reputation. They make you cynical. So I suggest for us older folks who remember Nancy Reagan, you follow the Nancy Reagan rule. Just say no. If you have a problem saying no to somebody who insists they want to hire you, let me give you a phrase. I am so sorry. I would love to work with you, but right now my workload is such that I would not be able to give you the time and attention it deserves. And here's one of my rules of thumb. You make the most money from the clients you don't take. What about existing clients? Well, if they don't pay, if they argue about charges, if they don't listen, if they ignore your advice, if they miss meetings, fire them. Again, don't live in hope. They're exhibiting all the warning signs of a client who is going to be miserable and probably at the end of the day either not pay you or file a grievance. Let them go. That's exactly the profile of someone who will file a grievance or a malpractice suit, and even worse, tell dozens of other people that you're a terrible lawyer. What does an A client look like? Well, it starts by being a referral from a referral source, a quality referral source, or a satisfied client. It's a decent matter, and it's within your area of expertise. They have reasonable expectations and a reasonable timeline, and they listen to you. They value you, and they're willing to work with you. And most importantly, they can and do pay. That's one of the things that I discuss with my clients is the client who extends the pay period and is always a little late and always wants to pay a little less is a client at the end of the day, you're going to end up with a very large bill. That's not paid. A clients are the ones that you go home at night feeling like you've done a good job because you've been able to serve them well and they've respected you for it. Here is an axiom that I sincerely believe in, and it's a bit of counterintuitive, but it's true. What it means is you have more time to focus on your good clients, to move your work, to manage your cash flow, and more time to market for those good clients. We're going to talk about that toward the end. More time to manage your business, your staff, your facilities, and most importantly, more personal time. I want to step back for just a moment and suggest that imposter syndrome, our striving to be, quote, successful, gets in the way of often having a great life. We have high expectations, and unfortunately, very often, that means that we're living beyond our means. That imposter syndrome sometimes means that we will buy the most expensive car, we'll wear the most expensive clothes, because that way we can try and fool people into thinking we're successful. That's the imposter syndrome. So I remember one of the most successful lawyers in Orlando when I was just beginning this work 35 years ago, drove this beat up old pickup. And that was his favorite car. And he was proud of it because he didn't need to demonstrate that he was successful. He was, but he was also a very happy man. So what are the key concepts for this? Set standards for who you're willing to take in. Actually create a written client selection checklist. I have some examples if you'd like me to send you them. So that you have something concrete to look at and remind you of those standards, and use it with every client. Avoid the living in hope intake syndrome and apply the hire slow, fire fast principle. If you have one of those miserable clients who slip through your intake process, know that you have a choice of, well, getting paid what you're owed or living with that miserable client for a long time to come. So one other little thing, as humans, we existed very well in tribes long before we had language. We communicated with body language. We were sensitive to how others looked, which means that down below all of our intellect, there is a great resource of non-verbal information. So you may be talking to a prospect that on the surface everything seems okay, but something is twisting up in your gut. There's something that's going on that you don't know. That's the nonverbal information that you're receiving at a subliminal level. So anytime you're talking with a prospect and you are uncomfortable and it gives you an unpleasant feeling, say no. Possibly you're wrong, but probably you're right, and you may have once again dodged a bullet. Second principle is hiring right. You see, if nothing gets done when you're not there, frankly, I don't care if you have 4 or 5 staff, but everything sort of stops until you get back. If nothing gets done when you're not there, you don't have a business. You have a job. And that's straight from the E-Myth Attorney, Michael Gerber, a book I would highly recommend. It's old, but it's got some of the most important core principles that you can ever come across. A cheap hire can be expensive. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into firms where they had to fire someone and they went through their desk and they discovered all kinds of things that had never been sent, never been filed. They found evidence of a huge amount of problems that person was hiding, and they didn't know it until they fired that person. Here's another thing that's very important. I want you to understand what your real priorities are in your practice. The first one is client development. It usually ends up at the bottom of the heap. If I have time, I'll think about doing something for that, or I'll buy some advertising. Well, the fact is, it should be the primary job that you focus on. Because the simple fact is, you can be the best lawyer in town. If you don't have any business, you're irrelevant. So client development is number one. If you're neglecting it, you're going to have a problem. The second is client relationships. There is a very large firm based in Orlando that has a pretty bad reputation for taking in lots of clients and then sort of losing them inside without good communication, follow-up, all sorts of things that happen. So your second job is to make sure those clients are happy they hired you. Third is, and this is where your education and experience comes in, sort of creating a strategy, mapping out how you're going to get that client to their goal, knowing how to get them there. Now, interestingly, the fourth priority is managing the team to get the result. I don't care how complex the matter is, 75 to 90% is slogging through paperwork, through discovery, through scheduling, through all sorts of things, most of which is not attorney level skills. It's paralegal level skills or even legal assistant skills. Your fifth priority is the high level legal work. In a word, the legal work that no one else in the firm can do. Reciprocally, if anyone else in the firm can do it, they should be, to clear your desk for doing the high-level legal work, taking good care of clients, and marketing, client development. So not on the list of those priorities is things like bookkeeping and office management and receptionist and data entry clerk. Every minute you spend here, you are not doing billable work. You're not marketing for billable work. One of the key things that I always suggest is every attorney should have a right hand. I don't care if it's your first employee or your 31st employee. You need what I would call an executive assistant. I want to help you that person should be helping you stay organized, helping you deliver quality work on a timely basis, supporting client relationships, acting as your front door, filtering your calls and emails, managing your schedule, all sorts of things that right now, very often you're doing most of this. So you need that person to help you expand that ability. And the biggest objection to hiring such a person very often is that I can't afford them. Well, the fact is you really can afford them. As a matter of fact, they should be a profit center. They should be billable if possible, doing a paralegal or legal assistant level work that you shouldn't be doing. And they could pay completely or at least partially for themselves. And if they're not billable, they're still a profit center because they're going to be taking non-billable work off your desk so you can bill more. Now, there's a little bit of an ethically fuzzy line here as well, because as a matter of fact, I see a lot of attorneys doing work and billing at their attorney rate, which is really paralegal or even legal assistant level work and should be billed at that rate. So from an ethical point of view, you want to make sure that the work goes to the appropriate level and is billed at that level, and that you're not essentially sort of lying to the client that you've done attorney level work for those 3 hours when it was really paralegal or legal assistant level work. One of the other advantages of having that what I would call an executive assistant who works closely with you, there are also a second set of eyes and hands to help make sure that you're delivering the highest level work. And they're there and often able to support clients because they're closely connected to all the work that's going on. They know the clients know them. So there's continuity and client support even when you're not there. The third principle is making sure you're in control of your files. And I want you to stop and think, do you know exactly to the number how many open files you have? Do you know the status of each one? Memory is not a reliable tool. You need systems, and systems that you actually use. So let's talk about case and workflow management, staying in control of your work. You see, when young attorneys start out, if they start out as solos, they have sort of a practice in a pocket. They only have a limited number of files, and it's fairly easy because all the files are sitting there on their desk, and so it's fairly easy to keep track of them. But the practice then grows. And if you're still trying to manage them by what the ethics people call verbal memory, which is kind of a misnomer, that's the time when you've got to rely on systems. Because what typically happens, and then frankly, I see this in a lot of contingency firms, personal injury firms, they have 300 or 400 files, and where they have gone is reactive. They're now just responding to angry clients. They're responding to opposing counsel. They're no longer proactive in managing their files. They're just trying to keep their heads above water. And that is a terrible place for you, and it's a terrible place for your clients. The result, again, is stress, fear, client frustration, and serious risk of errors and grievances and even actual malpractice. What do you need to know every day? Exactly how many files we have open and the current status of each. What is the next task that's to be done for each and when? And who is responsible for getting that done? You can build a very simple matrix, either in a system or on a simple spreadsheet, so that you can keep track of that. From here, you can expand in terms of managing your business to have a weekly list of how many new files opened and closed. So you begin to get some management information as well. But here is the basic attorney information that you need. How many open files, status of each, what is the thing we're working on or the thing that we need to be work on next, and when, and who is responsible for doing it. So guesswork is stress work. If you just said to yourself, well, I have about X number of files, that's guesswork. And I can almost guarantee you, if you go back and do an official inventory of your files, you'll be surprised one way or the other. Principle 4 is managing your time, how to increase your quality and your efficiency, and along the way, actually increase your capacity, move work more quickly, reduce your time and stress. So there's a myth of time management. You can't manage time. It just keeps clicking away. You can only manage how you use it. Law school taught you how to do the process, but it didn't keep you focused on the result. Law school really taught you to be a control freak, and that is one of the biggest weaknesses, one of the biggest stressors that you can imagine. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with assistants that say basically they never can get a document finished. They'll draft something, I type it up, give it back to them, make 12 changes, I revise it, give it back to them, make 14 more changes, and it goes on forever. I have a basic rule here about your document development. When the document accomplishes the client's goal, the goal it was designed to accomplish, it's done. If there's a syntax problem, if there's a missing comma, if there's some small issues, let it go, it's done. If it's going to accomplish the purpose, it is done. The client doesn't care that your grammar is perfect, that your phrasing is wonderful. They just want to know, where are we? Did we get it done? Principle number 5 is to make a plan. This is something I really want you to remember. If you don't take control of your time, everyone else will. And I can pretty well bet that most of you are controlled by other people. Your clients, your staff, everyone who is taking a bite of your time because you're not managing it correctly. So what does an average attorney's day look like? Well, you come in and you start to work on something important, and then there's a phone call. And then there's a staff member who comes in and wants to talk about something. And then you start to do something else, and then your day just keeps being broken into tiny, tiny pieces, little segments, over and over again. You start, you're interrupted, you start something else happens. And by the end of the day, it's a maze. Go to lunch? Oh, yeah, sure. I don't have time to go to lunch. And your day simply continues on ad infinitum, bitten into tiny, small pieces. And of course, one of the things that means is when we get to 6 o'clock, it goes to 7 and to 8 o'clock, because you ask yourself, what the heck did I get done today? So many attorneys, that's almost an axiom, so many attorneys get their best work done after hours. What does that mean? After interruptions stop. So the cost of that is stress, fear, out of control, long hours, lost billable time, high staff turnover. They're going through the same thing you are. Revenue ceilings, how efficient, how much more revenue can you make when you still don't have enough time yet? And that feeling of being out of control. That feeling has you leave the office feeling overwhelmed and out of control. And when you drive to the office in the morning and you get out of the car, your stomach knots up because you start feeling out of control. What happens there? No marketing. And let me say, if you ignore marketing long enough, it'll be okay, because you won't have that much business to do. Understand that time is all you have to sell. You have to decide to manage your inventory. So this is called time blocking. And it means that you have actually got a calendar, a weekly calendar that is structured so that you can get your work done and you can address all of the relevant priorities. So production time, team meetings, meetings with your assistant, returning calls, email, appointments, time to manage, time to market, and a specific open door time for team. Now, let me say that one of your biggest interruptions is your team, because they come to you for information, they need direction and things of that sort, but that can often be a little bit of a trap. First of all, there are a lot of team members who don't want to be responsible for making a decision. They know what to do, but they want you to tell them so that if it's wrong, it's your problem, not theirs. So when you have a specific open door time for team and they can't just walk in randomly at 10:15, two things will happen. Number one is they'll be forced to batch their questions. They'll have to come in with 3 or 4 or 5 questions that they've accumulated during the day. And the other thing is that a lot of the questions will actually disappear, because they'll say, well, let me ask him about, oh, well, I can't talk to him till 4 o'clock. Well, I know what they're going to say anyway. So they'll go back to their desk and do it. So having a closed door time when team can't interrupt you, and an open door time when it's time for you to support them, will make a significant difference, not only in your efficiency, but theirs as well. So what does a time plan day look like? And this is not exactly what I'm suggesting. It's just a sample, but it'll give you the idea. You have literally 15 minutes, a half an hour in the morning. The whole purpose is to make sure that your day goes smoothly. Then you may start with a team meeting or a staff meeting or a meeting with your assistant, very specifically to say, okay, what are we addressing today? What are the issues? So this is a meeting where you're pushing down, where you're identifying priorities. This is not necessarily a Q&A time for staff, but it's where you are directing your staff, and you're also coordinating with your staff as to what's going on. Then you have a period of time when your door is closed, and your job is to bill, is to do the work that you are required to do. Now, in order to do that, you have to protect yourself, and I'll go into that in just a moment. Now, you also have a specific block, it's on your calendar, to make and return calls. What that means is, and I'll go into this in again a little bit too, your executive assistant, your right hand, doesn't put calls through to you. What they do is they say simply, she's behind closed doors right now. Let me schedule a time for them to call you back. Now, that may sound a little strange, but it's actually a very significant client service, because one of the frustrations that clients have is, and you've probably heard it many times, I call them, but they never call me back. Well, it's not exactly true, but that's the perception when that call goes a day or 2 or 3 days and doesn't get made. So when a call is scheduled and you've actually segmented your calendar so that you have a specific time in order to return calls, and the client knows that you're going to call them at 4:30, it's a client service, and it also avoids telephone ping pong. It avoids frustrating clients, and you planned for that call. It hasn't just dropped in the middle of your working on something else. Then you actually try and schedule enough time so you can take a break and have lunch, and hopefully go to lunch with a marketing contact. Then you have a area that's blocked off where you're actually having client appointments or prospect appointments, or if not that, then you're back into uninterruptible production time. Again, you may have a return and make calls time. Notice that says email time as well. One of the traps we have is email takes control of us. All we have to hear is that ding, and we're like Pavlov. We run to see what the email is. And so the concept here is your right hand, your executive assistant, is the first one to see your email. They will delete all the irrelevant things. They will handle what they can, and they'll trim that email down to just those things that only you can deal with. So you may have more open door time for staff or team time. You've got a half an hour or an hour at the end of the day to check in with some of your contacts and socialize with some of your marketing folks. And you have a plan, a scheduled time to go home. So how do you manage the big four interruptions? Number one is telephone. It's both office phone and cell phone. Your assistant always takes your calls. They can either handle it or schedule a return call, or if it's an emergency, they'll put it through. But you never answer your own phone. You hand your cell phone to your assistant for the same process. Now, I know that that will cause cold sweat to break out on the foreheads of a lot of folks. But the fact is that your cell phone needs to be part of your communications process. And if you have calls coming in on your cell phone for business, your assistant needs to handle those as well. As a matter of fact, that's a complaint I hear sometimes. They do so much calls on their cell phone, I don't quite know what's going on. So this system allows your assistant to stay closest in touch with everything that's going on for you in the business. What about email? Well, again, as we talked about, your assistant, your right hand, your executive assistant should see your email first. They delete, they handle what they can, they forward emails to the right person to handle them, or they leave it for you. And the good ones can even draft a reply for you to shorten that process as well. You should be handling your email at specified times. You know, think back in ancient history when the mail only came in once a day, and you could go through it when the mailman handled you the mail. We've lost that control. Now your mail, your email, your text messages come in constantly, and they're one of the things that take over and take charge of you and allow you to not manage your time. What about your team? You close your door during production time and you enforce that. You know, when somebody peeks in and says, I just have a real quick question, say at 4 o'clock. You have an open door time, maybe twice a day on your time plan, so that your team knows that that's the time to come in and ask the questions they have. And as I say, many of them will disappear. And some of them, and let me throw in a quick tip here. If you have someone that's always asking you questions and you know they probably know the answer, when they say, what do I do about so-and-so? You say, well, what do you think you should do? And when they say, well, and so forth, see, you knew that. Good, go ahead. So you start to retrain them to trust their own knowledge by using that method. Then you schedule regular team or individual meeting times, certainly with your assistant once a day at the least, maybe weekly team meetings, and you may want to schedule specific times to meet with certain people, other associates or paralegals, to go over complex issues. So schedule time. That's one of the important concepts here, is the way that you keep control of your time is schedule things. Your own work time, meeting time, meeting with individuals, put it on a calendar, put it on their calendar and your calendar. But again, your assistant should be the one controlling and managing your schedule. The biggest one very often is self-interruptions. First of all, put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Don't pick the phone up and hand your cell phone to your assistant. Turn off your email, because remember, your assistant should be looking at the email and making sure that everything's being taken care of, so that you can create a calm and uninterrupted environment. Now, as I said, this is an approach called time blocking. Now, what that means is if you spent 3 undisturbed hours with your door closed, with no interruptions, working on billable work, you can actually record that 3 or 3.5 hours, whatever you worked, because your time wasn't chopped up into little tiny pieces. You spent an hour and a half on one thing, you spent 40 minutes on something else, and it's easy to track, and you got a whole lot of work done. One of the most common comments I hear when my clients try this is, I couldn't believe how much work I got done in a week. It's because the way that you were working was incredibly inefficient and hugely stressful. So you're going to have to retrain your ADD. And as a matter of fact, I often say, if you didn't have ADD before you became a lawyer, you really got it now, because it trains you to have it. So, and I need to say this, and I should have said this in the beginning. I know this is like drinking from a water hose. What I'm going over here, trying to convey to you in an hour, is literally what I work with my clients over a period of a year or more to step by step implement this. So time management is one of the really critical pieces of all of this. It's helping you organize and use your time better. And it involves a lot of changing of very, very strong habits. It's about changing your habits of ADD, trained or natural. It's very important, but this is one of the places where you can actually see your billings increase, not because you're doing more work, but you're capturing it because of the way you're working. You're not losing little pieces of time here and there from a telephone call or a conversation or things of that sort. So one of the first things that effective time management will do will be to increase your revenues. The second, it will be decreasing your stress dramatically. And in all of that, it will mean increasing your capacity, because you're able to get work done more efficiently and effectively. So you can either contact me by an email, Dustin@attorneysmasterclass.com, or you can call me on my business number, which is 407-830-9088. Yeah, that's a Florida area code. I lived in Orlando for 30 years. I now live in Frankfort, Kentucky, but obviously I kept all my business phone numbers. Now, by the way, that's not a text message number. That's a business office number. So either call me or email me. Now, I've made a commitment to Florida lawyers, assistants, and also to any of their colleagues around the country to do this seminar and provide support to any of them, because I believe, I guess I would have to honestly say, I believe it saves lives. So please feel free to call me, and I'm happy to talk you through any particular issues. If for some reason you decide you want to work with me long-term, that's fine. But if I can help with a phone call, I'm very, very pleased to do that for no charge. The sixth issue is initial client education, and I find this is one of the biggest missing pieces of all. And that is, first of all, you need to decide if they're going to fit your profile and your minimum standards. So most attorneys do the hire me dance when it's a mutual interview. They're interviewing you to see if they want to hire you, and you should be interviewing them to see if you want them in your practice. So, but in the process, when you decide that you're going to take them into your practice, give them a basis to work with you. First of all, introduce your team, and particularly your right-hand assistant. Let them know you're going to be working with me, but I have a team and they're all going to be working with you as well. You might talk to so-and-so, you might talk to my right hand. Many of them will be calling you along the way. So we're all working on your behalf. Don't overpromise. Make it clear to them that you're going to apply all your expertise and you're very optimistic, but there are always the unknowns of the judge, the courts, the opposing counsel. So I can't make any promises, but I can tell you I'm very optimistic. And by the way, let me go back here for a moment. Particularly in personal injury, do not give them a number immediately. In fact, try not to give them Always give them a range, because if you give them a number, it will stick in your brain and they will haunt you with it. Define the legal relationship. What does that mean? Well, here's exactly how this is all going to work. Here's how we handle calls. For instance, if you call and I'm not available, my assistant will schedule us a time to talk, so you'll always know when we're going to talk. Here are the things I'm going to be representing you for, and very specifically, that's all. There are other things that may come up, but that's not in the scope of representation on this matter. Here is what my role is and my responsibilities in this relationship, and here is your role and your responsibilities in the relationship. It's important for you to tell your client, look, you have to be an active and participating member of the team. We're going to need to ask you a lot of questions. You're going to need to supply us with a lot of information. We're going to have meetings to discuss things. So you have to be active participating in this. Missing meetings, not responding, and so forth is going to seriously damage my ability to get you where you want to go. So these are the things that you're responsible for and how you need to be participating in this relationship. How do we make decisions? Explain that to them. Discuss the financial specifics. Most people hate to go here, but you kind of have to. What are the billing rates of me and team members? Excuse me. How do we bill time for various kinds of work? What other things you might see on your bill? When we send bills and when we expect to get paid, and what happens if bills are not paid. Again, you need to have a very, very specific objective policy about receivables as to when you make a second call, when you're expected to be paid, and frankly, when you fire them. Make all of this in writing. It's something that you hand them a copy of and you talk it through with them so that they have all of this in writing, and you put it in a nice folder for future reference. The payoff is no mystery or surprises for clients. Understand that the average client who hasn't worked with attorneys before sees this as looking into a big dark cave. They don't know what's going to happen, what's it going to look like. They come into your office in some level of fear. So your responsibility is to try and set this up so that they have a clear picture of what's going to happen and their fear is reduced and they know what's expected of them. That's called mutual accountability. If they start going off on you about something, about bills or meetings or phone calls and so forth, you now have the ability to say, we discussed that. In fact, it's paragraph 6 in that material that we gave you. We went over that about how we return phone calls, and we've been doing that diligently. So you can basically hold the client accountable for having agreed to and understand the process. As a matter of fact, I have a document that I often suggest, particularly my family law attorney clients use. It's called an integrity agreement. It basically lays that out. Here's my responsibilities, here's your responsibilities, and both you and the client sign it, and they get a copy for their file. And now you have sort of a signed document that you can point to when they start complaining about something. You can hold them accountable for agreeing to the terms and having heard about it. So again, it defines all the standards and responsibilities, and it becomes a written reference for the client that you can point to. In some cases, clients may not accept all of this. And if that's so, you've dodged another bullet. So a client who doesn't understand this and isn't willing to say, yep, I understand and I know how this works and so forth, is probably going to be one of your D clients in the future. So know that this is an important conversation. And clearly, there's a lot of diplomatic phrasing in here, and it's something that you need to sort of work out a script for and rehearse so that you can go through it in a clear way, but also in a non-threatening way. And that's something I help my clients with as well. But it's important. It's important that that both of you reiterate how you're going to work together. And what it really means is it gives you a better chance to have and continue an A-level relationship. Okay, I want to take a moment and give you a bonus principle number 7, and that's marketing. Because again, that's usually a big missing from law school. Marketing, as I have said before, is job one. It's not the last thing that you try and squeeze in if you get a chance once or twice a month. It should be job one. The best lawyer in the world without clients is irrelevant. Marketing doesn't need to be expensive. You know, my belief is that the huge investments that people make in advertising and search engine optimization, and the time that's invested in social media is incredibly low result. It's expensive either in actual money or in time. It's low return. And it very often attracts the wrong kind of client. Again, those people who come to you from a web search or because they saw your billboard or somehow, got a message through SEO are those who essentially don't have another friend in the world. So very often, they're the wrong kind of client. So the investment that you need to make in your marketing is time. The best clients are referred clients. I know this sounds archaic, but it is just as true today as it ever was. It's not about billboards. It's not about SEO. It's not about blogs. Blogs are dead. It's not about social media. And by the way, blogs were where everybody was pushing blogs some years back and they died. Why? Well, because it wasn't a good idea. It didn't work. Social media is very much like that. So the best clients are referred clients, clients that come through another professional. So you need to focus on building your professional referral network. Why are they better? Well, it doesn't cost you a lot to acquire them. You don't have to buy billboards and spend all that money. A good referrer often screens for you. They don't send you crap. There's an initial higher trust level. It's actually a situation called transfer of relationship. If they go to someone they trust for a recommendation for a lawyer, when they come in with that same level of trust in you that they had in that other person. And that results in what you could call an assumptive sale. In the world of sales, an assumptive sale means you just talk with them as though they've already decided to hire you. Because in most cases, a referred client has done exactly that. They've walked in the door assuming they're probably going to hire you. When that means you start the relationship up at a much higher level of trust and communication. They're more likely to pay because you have higher credibility. So it comes down to 4 basic things. Now, as a matter of fact, I want to relate this to some of the earlier conversations. The first principle is talk to the right people. These are people who know you, like you, trust you, and are happy to help. Now, there may be people who don't know, like you, and trust you. They're strangers. So some of those may be on your list to develop this relationship with. Now, notice those last 3, like you, trust you, happy to help. Referral marketing is essentially about expanding your circle of friends. So it's not sales. It's hardly even what you could call marketing. It's about developing relationships. So one of the values to referral marketing is that you have a group of people around you that actively like you and demonstrate that by sending you referrals. And that, to me, can be a significant support group. You go to lunch with somebody that you just like and they just like you, and you just have a nice lunch. You don't talk about business, you don't sell anything. It's just a pleasant interlude. And as a result, they know you, they like you, they trust you, and they send you referrals. So referral marketing is a very, very strong way to support your mental health by surrounding you with people who like you and help you. And you want to have a database of that. The fact is, you don't need to market to the immediate world. You don't need to market to strangers. You need to market to a clearly defined list of individuals, some of whom are good friends, some of whom are acquaintances, and some of are strangers. But there are people that you put on your list because they have high potential to refer you business. Get key information from them so you can stay in touch. Keep notes. When you have a lunch with them, go back to your office. Two things you do. First thing you do is write a couple of notes. Said they were going to head for Italy on a vacation in the fall. The second thing is that you put on your calendar a month or 6 weeks from now, a reminder to connect with that person again. Calendar your reminder. And by the way, if you have software, you can probably do most or all of this in that software. So use your software. So your goal is to develop and expand of people with high potential to refer you business consistently over time. So they're in a practice area that they may run into a fair number of people who might need your services. Now, the other part of this is develop and expand a list of people you like to associate with who also have the ability to help you. The second is build trust relationship. Don't sell. Everybody gets insincerity, and boy, that's the biggest turnoff right off the top. It's not about sales. You don't need to talk business. Stop marketing and focus on just being a good friend, just making connection with that person. And the way that you do that is be interested and listen to what they're saying. And remember, this is where you make a note. There's no better tool to build a relationship than ask about something they told you about a month or two ago. Because that says subliminally to the other person, they like me, they think I'm important. And that's the biggest boost you can get to a relationship. So listen, remember, take notes, and before you go out, take a look at your notes. So there will be a time to sell yourself, but it will only be when they ask. Now, I know you do family law, but do you do anything else? I'm not sure. What other kinds of things do you do? Now you have a chance to tell them what you do. Again, make notes after each contact. Review your notes before you go to lunch with them again. So you avoid Groundhog Day, having the same lunch over and over and over again. You're building friendships. You're expanding your circle of friends. Third is make sure they know what you do. So educate them about what you do and who you work with. And that's pretty easy because we all tell war stories, and you get a chance to often tell war stories and things like, I was working with one of my biggest commercial real estate clients the other day, and he was saying to me, so you just educated them on someone you work with, but it wasn't even noticeable. It was under the radar education. You want to speak value and benefits and results instead of the process. Because most of how lawyers introduce themselves to strangers, to referral sources, is about the process rather than the result. So for instance, I do real estate. Okay, that's a process. What's the benefit to the client? I help families move into new homes. I do estate planning. That's a process again. What does that mean? Well, I help people protect their families and loved ones. I'm a divorce lawyer. Oh, that'll get them running for the shrimp dip. Divorce lawyers are scary. So when somebody asks you what you do, rather than saying I'm a divorce lawyer, you say, I help people work through bad family situations. I do collections. What do you drive a big green truck around town, do you? No, I help people get paid what they're owed. It's that simple. If you do collections, the benefit is you help people get paid. This is one of my favorites. I do personal injury. What do you go out there and hit people? Come on. You're there after the injury. I help people put their lives back together when they've been hurt. I do bankruptcy. Well, okay, that's fine. Help people work through bad financial situations. So understand that people need to understand what you do, but they also need to be able to tell others what you do. So rather than saying, oh, they do bankruptcy, they're going to say to that person, hey, this lady helps people work through their bad financial situations. Here's her phone number. So you're actually helping other people learn how to talk to other people about you. So the last is maintain consistent contact over time. You need to keep the relationship warm. We all have short memories. Just because I saw you 3 months ago doesn't mean you're going to come to mind when I need to make a referral. You need to maintain top of mind awareness. And the way that you do that is consistently contacting them over time. That's why I say when you go to lunch with them or you talk with them on the phone, immediately diary a reminder to contact them a month, 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever you deem appropriate, to touch base with them again and remind them that you exist. And one of the biggest missings I often see is people get referrals and they either don't ask where it came from, or when they find out, they don't do anything about it. It is the perfect opportunity to send a handwritten, mailed note. Boy, doesn't that sound archaic? That says, thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate your trust. Now, if you send that in an email, they're going to look at it and that's going to register up for about 10 minutes. But if you send an actual little thank you note by ancient postal mail, snail mail, it's going to sit on the corner of their desk for days, maybe even weeks, because it's so special. So that's one of the things that you do in staying in contact with people, is making sure that you thank them when they send you a referral. Refer that list often and make sure that you're staying in touch with everybody. Calendar reminders to contact. So 4 simple rules. Talk to the right people, build relationships, educate, and stay in touch. That's the whole game in referral marketing. You do this consistently over a long period of time, and your practice will prosper. And remember, legal services are your product, not your life. It takes a legal business, not a practice. And the primary purpose of your business is to allow you to have a great life. Thank you. Please feel free to call me. If you want to discuss an issue, send me an email. I am happy to talk. No charge. I want to support Florida Lawyers Assistance efforts and you. And if for some reason you want to do more than that, we can talk about it, but it's not necessary. Happy to talk with you at no charge. So thank you again.
Thank you, Dustin. Dustin, we have one question you can comment on. Mostly we have just a lot of comments that say things like, this is gold. These are fantastic concepts and ideas. I want to thank the host for booking Mr. Cole. Fantastic, practical, applicable advice. I'm already sharing it with my partners and my paralegals, and we're going to implement this. Several comments like that, Mr. Cole, thank you. There is one question. The Your Day slide doesn't seem reasonable for a big law lawyer. How can I make that work in a practice for an attorney with a Law 200 law firm? with the billable hour requirement, a 9-hour day probably isn't feasible. Would you like to comment on that very briefly, Dustin? We're gonna move on.
Sure. I would ask that person, what's your priority? Your life or your practice? If you want to make a lot of money, if you want to work yourself to death, if you want to have a heart attack at 45, that sounds like a good route to it. So at some point, you have to say, am I going to be caught in the machine doing what everybody else says I should do, or do I want something else? So frankly, the requirements of most big law firms are inhuman. The structures of big law firms are inhuman. Some years ago, one of my good friends was one of the most senior attorneys in, I won't mention the name of the firm, but they had a downsizing and they withdrew his shares. He'd been with them 35 years. So if you want to be in big law, assume that you're going to have a divorce and a heart attack at 45 and an ulcer. You may be driving a Mercedes, but you'll be driving it away from the office at 10:30 at night. Take a look at your priorities.
Thank you, Dustin. I mean, big part of building balance is noting the trade-offs and
yes,
prioritizing life. And I also have a lot of friends at big law firms who are thriving and doing well. And I think all these things come down to an individual. But with that, Dustin, I want to thank you. We will send you the comments via email in the next day or so. I cut and paste them.
That's great. I appreciate it. Oh, by the way, you will have all of this up online too, will you not? You're recording all this? So remind everyone that they can rewatch this, or they can have their colleagues rewatch it as well.
Indeed.
But don't let them, if they're in big firm, don't let them rewatch that last part we just discussed. Okay.
we might have to do a little editing there.
A little editing.
So, it is my pleasure now to move on to our last presentation. I'm trusting